Hello, my name's Yvonne, and I'm going to be the moderator of this week's webinar. It's Viruses and Diseases. We're going to be talking about a few viruses and diseases that we picked, and this is a great topic, knowing that our time is filled with diseases, including Ebola, SARS, and SARS-CoV-2. So let's peer into the contents. Obviously, we have the About Us pages. Then we're going to be talking about our viruses and diseases. And then we're going to be doing our Q&A interaction session. Hello, like introduced, I'm Vivan, and things I like to do are play with the Arduino, watch science videos, and things like that. I'm going to be talking about COVID-19. Arush?
Hi, my name is Arush, and today I'm going to be talking about tuberculosis. I'm a 7th grader at Baker Middle School, and some things I like to do are watch TV, play video games, and read books.
Thank you, Arush. Wish? Oh, right, Wish isn't here. Ahana?
Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Ahana Arun Kumar, and some of my hobbies are doing drawings and online drawings, and doing arts and crafts and playing online games with my friends. And in today's Let Us Talk It webinar, I will be talking about a virus called the polio virus.
Okay, Virat?
My name is Bharat, and I like to do experimenting with the Arduino and some other boards like that. And I've also been experimenting with the Raspberry Pi lately, kind of like a computer. And in this one, I'm going to be talking about influenza.
Okay, thank you. Pahel?
Hi everyone, my name is Fahel Kalra. I'm a 7th grader in Michigan. Some things I like to do is math and soccer.
Thank you. Mahadi?
Hey everybody, my name is Mahadi, and in today's webinar, I'll be talking about the Black Plague. I am a 7th grader in Michigan, and some things I like to do are writing and painting.
Okay, Chaitanya?
Hello everybody, my name is Chaitanya, and I'm a 4th grader at Devon Elementary School, and some things I like to do are soccer and playing outside. And this week's webinar, today I'm going to be talking about the retrovirus.
Okay, thank you. Pahel is going to be talking about what is a virus.
Before we get into all details about what other people picked, I want to first take a minute and tell you what a virus is. A virus is an infectious agent of small size and simple composition that can be multiplied only in living cells of animals, plants, and bacteria. Basically, it is a tiny germ that can only multiply in a living organism. Next slide, please.
Okay.
Okay. The first question I'll be talking about is, how did it get its name? Since it was discovered in Ebola River in Africa, they decided to name it Ebola. Second question, how did it spread? Ebola spread by direct contact with blood and other liquids like vomit, sweat, and it is extremely contagious in Africa. How many deaths did it cause, and what percent of people died of it? It caused 11,325 deaths, and only 10% of the people who got it survived, and 90% of them died. Next slide, please. These are the compounds of the virus, of the virus. Next slide, please. Okay, how did the spread stop? Well, treatment centers and isolation zones were set up to reduce the spread of the virus, and face masks, gowns, and gloves were used. Safe burial practices also helped to limit the transmission of the virus, as did screening of passengers at international and domestic ports and airports. Symptoms: fever, aches and pains such as a severe headache, muscle or joint pain, weaknesses, and vomit, diarrhea, and stomach pain. Is there a vaccine? The the first vaccine was approved by the FDA to prevent Ebola in December 2019. Next slide, please. How did it end? After 22 months, the 10th Ebola virus outbreak had 3,470 confirmed or 70 confirmed cases. And this during the outbreak, which ended this June, and that was the last outbreak. Thank you for listening.
Okay, I think that was great, Pahel. I really thought it was interesting that the Ebola actually needed safe burial practices. I never heard of that as a prevention of transmission. And also, it after 22 months, that's more than a year. Okay. Um, Hello, my name is Yvonne. I'm going to be talking about the COVID-19. So here's some statistics. There are 140 million cases. Wow. I never intended that it would be that high. Or even if I did, I didn't know that it was lower than what I thought it would be. Then 79.8 million recovered. Well, that's a good thing actually. And 3 million deaths. That is a very small portion compared to the 140 million cases. But facts aside, I'm going to be talking about the COVID-19 virus. So I'm going to be talking about how it works. COVID-19 is transmitted through the air, and it can be through if you breathe, if you talk, and things like that. Um, but you, but it cannot be transmitted by water, meaning that it is safe to be in a pool with a friend who has a COVID. Just don't get too close, 6 feet distance. Anyway, the virus makes its way in through the tubes of your respiratory system, and it can make its way either into the bronchi or into the alveoli. Alveoli are your air sacs, and that's where it mainly goes. It goes and finds the nearest cell, it hijacks a cell, and inserts its RNA. Well, you can find the picture of DNA on my slide. It's right above the cell, and RNA is just half of that. So the abbreviations are DNA for um, deoxyribonucleic acid, and RNA is ribonucleic acid. The the virus makes a small opening in the cell and injects its RNA. While it kills the virus, the RNA just takes over the cell, causing the whole cell to put its main functions into making the cell instead of I mean instead of doing its tasks, it just keeps making viruses. Once it's full of viruses, it just explodes and sending viruses everywhere. And the coronavirus works with that principle. It does that over and over and over again. And this is the same principle for other respiratory viruses. Anyway, if you didn't know, COVID actually stands for coronavirus. Uh, yeah, coronavirus in date 2019. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about the process of making vaccines. First, you have to identify the vaccine. So one, not the vaccine, the virus. So after you know what the virus is, you will know it's which family tree it comes from. So you will know other viruses that are related to it. And that will help you because you can find vaccines which are pretty similar. And if you find similar vaccines, then you can find ways to make the vaccine quicker. Then you can also find out what would be a mutant strain, which will help you in curing that mutant strain if you already have the vaccine. So, um, then you gotta test. You gotta test on the virus over and over and over again. You gotta find out what weakens the virus, what kills the virus, and things like that. You gotta know how the virus works. Just get to know the inner workings of the virus. Then you have to do trials. This is the hardest part. You have to test on animals first. That's phase one. They give the test vaccines to the animals. If it fails, they have to remake the virus. Then they have to make it to the animals. If it goes through, they have to move it to the humans. And after they do it to the humans, then they have to do it to more humans. But if that fails, they have to remake the vaccine over and over again. That's why making vaccines can take up to months and months, and even years. So, how do these vaccines work? Well, once you inject a vaccine, it's usually comprised of a weakened version of the virus or a dead version of the virus. Either way, the immune system detects that there's a foreign invader, and the first cell to catch hold of the virus will just rip it to pieces and give those virus particles to a nearby cell. Those cells will find ways to make the antibodies because there are different types of cells in the immune system. Ones that make the antibodies, ones that kill the viruses themselves by eating them, well, which are called phagocytes and neutrocytes. Um, then, after the antibodies are made for the dead or the weakened version, the normal virus, which is very similar to the um, weakened version or the dead version, can be caught easily because you have the antibodies to it already. Yeah. So thank you. That's all about the COVID-19 virus. Okay. Um, Virat, go on.
Did you know that influenza kills 12,000 to 56,000 people and sends as many as 700,000 people to the hospital? Well, it may not seem like a lot to scratch the 7.5 billion people on Earth, but every single matters. And I said every year. Yeah, that's right. And every single year it kills that many people and sends that many people to the hospital. If you click, then you'll see the fact pop up. Yes, and the next one is that the flu, well, the influenza changes every single season, and that's why you should get your shots. And you get flu shots, right? Well, this is exactly what it's for. It mutates more and more. And so we need to find a vaccine which fits for that specific mutation. Don't be complaining about the flu shot. I mean, it's what we gotta do to survive. And then finally, the last fact is that many people think that you can get a cold and a flu just by going into cold weather, but no. It's just that the flu season just goes up with cold weather. The flu season starts in the winter season, not that cold weather's related to it. Anyway, you can click again to see the facts too. And there's another one too. Yeah. And influenza is a really common virus, and it is vaccinated. And if you get it already, it is treatable, and it's airborne, meaning it's very similar. Well, meaning that it can go through air, and it is very similar to COVID because it is also a respiratory virus, and it's a H1N1 type, meaning that basically it's a specific type of virus, and most H1N1s are the flu, just a different type. And influenza is another way of saying flu because there are so many types of flus: hay flu and swine flu and Spanish flu. We don't want to get confused with those. Those are different. So on the next slide, I have the symptoms. So the symptoms are that the virus, well, I have the symptoms right here, and the virus goes into your respiratory system like any virus would do. It would enter the respiratory tract through the nose, just basically meaning it'll go through your mouth and the esophagus, or basically a tube going through your whole entire body all the way to your lungs. And it goes down and down and starts replicating itself once it attaches itself to a few of the cells in the throat. And that's why it'll cause cough, sore throat, and runny slash stuffy nose. Pretty much those are the ones which are going to start first. It'll replicate itself as it travels to the lungs, and the respiratory tract becomes very swollen and inflamed, causing flu symptoms. As you see this diagram, it splits off into the lungs, and then just like COVID, it'll start replicating and start getting and eating away on those cells. So that's about the symptoms there. And here I just keep more symptoms: fatigue, headaches, body aches, runny nose, sore throat, cough, fever, chills, things like that all happen. And pneumonia is fatal and it's rare. Not well, I'm not saying like that kind of rare. Pneumonia could come from the flu, but it's one of the most known ways that pneumonia you do get from flu is that if the flu is not treated in time, then you will get pneumonia, and there'll have to be a lot of serious medical action needed. And on the next slide, did you know that more than $25 billion were lost in productivity? Yes, it's it's not like the flu season didn't kill a lot of people and didn't send a lot of people to the hospital. I mean, like 700,000 people. That's no joke. One person could be like $100. They could be, or one. Let's say each person was $1,000 and 700. That means it's like we would approximate like a $700 million loss just from sending people to the hospital. Wow, that's a really big loss. And here is just a graph about the flu deaths per week in the USA, and you see it goes along, and this you might see why you might be questioning why it says 1750 while there are like a lot of deaths. It actually means per week. So at 2017 to 2018, there were actually 1,700 deaths per week. It was happening like that. So it would be that. At the start, 2013, it was not really known, and it goes down, and then it goes back up since not many people knew about it, then it goes down. It's actually going down because in the summer, the flu can't really spread that much because the flu season starts in the winter, and it has adapted to the winter. It goes down again since people get aware, and then people start getting lost of the precautions, and it rises. Then it rises even more, and then it goes down with some precautions. Then it just goes up and down here, and it's not really gonna change much nowadays since like we need the protection of COVID things, like we put on masks, hand sanitizer, we wash our hands, all these protection. not all of it was followed during the influenza season, but some of it. And now that we have all these precautions, it's actually going to protect us from the flu. So I wouldn't say that the COVID-19 pandemic was a good thing. I'm just saying that it helped reduce the flu also. And on the next slide is the summary. So influenza is a dangerous virus, and I told you about its symptoms and things like that. And it is the flu, it's just another way of saying it. Like I said, influenza is cured, and it is very similar to COVID. So that was for number one. And number two, the future of healthcare. Eventually, the flu will be eradicated like others, and there have been a lot of viruses which have been eradicated, and flu might also be another one of them. So that was all.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Virat. I think it was pretty interesting that influenza killed a lot of people, even though it wasn't that well, even though it is not too well known, and it's just very fascinating that influenza was coincidental with a lot of things. Um, Ahana with polio.
Okay. So, hi everyone. As I said before, I will be talking about a virus called polio. In 1908, Carl Lancer and Irwin Popper identified a virus as cause of polio by transmitting the disease into a monkey. And in 1916, a large epidemic polio was within the United States. Polio is a preventable, life-threatening disease, and all adults and children need to be immunized to protect against polio. There are two ways to get the vaccine. One way is with 2 drops that go in your mouth. This is called an OVP. The OVP is a vaccine that will help you strengthen the person who gets the vaccine's guts, and it also will protect the people around the vaccinated person. The OPV was made by Albert Sabin. The other vaccine is a shot. And another name for that vaccine is the inactive polio vaccine, or the IPV. This strengthens the blood, but this vaccine doesn't help people around it. It only helps the person who got vaccinated. This vaccine was developed by John Sack in and it was used first in 1955. The polio virus spreads through food, water, and even when your hands touch your face. The polio affects people who are mostly really young, people who have a weakened immune system, and those with HIV, and also pregnant women and the elderly. The most, the most. The symptoms for the virus are that you get very floppy limbs and you lose your reflexes. You feel a weird tingly sensation in your legs, and you'd also get paralyzed. You would be paralyzed in your arms and your legs, and also the muscles that you need for breathing. There is no cure for polio, but treatment aims to manage the effects of the disease. Supportment options include antibiotics, pain relieving medications, for portable ventilators to assist breathing, massages, physiotherapy, heat treatment, and even a nutritious diet. People still get polio in the United States? No, thanks to a successful vaccination process in the United States. So the USA has been polio free for more than 30 years. But wild polio virus has been eradicated in all continents except Asia. And as of 2020, Kazakhstan and Pakistan are the only two countries where the disease is still classified as epidemic. So thank you for listening.
Thanks, Ahana. I found it very interesting that polio makes you paralyzed and that it affects you so much that you're unable to do the daily tasks that any other human can. Okay, next we have Mahadi doing the bubonic plague.
Thank you, Vivan. It is 1346. You are currently in your house where it is cramped and tiny. There are messes everywhere, including a lot of dirt and even rats. You're lying on a four-poster bed covered in red sheets and pillows, much like the one on the slide. The hands and legs of your body are covered with black patches, spreading as the day goes by. Your blood is turning black, your forehead is hot, and you cannot move. You look up and see a figure with a beak-like mask and a black uniform that's very scary. You have the bubonic plague. This plague was one of the scariest viruses you could have gotten in the medieval era. It spread across the world and caused a viral pandemic. About half of Europe died and even more in Asia. So let's learn about this horrifying plague. So let's start with these 4 questions: the where, the what, the when, and the how. Starting with the what. The bubonic plague, also known as the Black Plague or Black Death, was a plague that infected people to the point for them to die within 12 hours. In the how, the plague originated from China. Back then, the living conditions were absolutely disgusting, and they all lived in very close quarters, even amongst rats. A very specific type, the black rat, had been carrying a flea, which carried a bacteria that was very harmful to people. As you can see on the slide, the rat was very, very large, and it could possibly carry more. The bacteria was called Yersinia pestis. This bacteria had made Asia suffer from many symptoms that finally caused their death. After a few ships traveled, the plague had made itself to Europe, where it was the most deadly, and many people suffered. The plague had occurred from the time periods 1346 to 1353, 7 long years. But over time, it had finally gotten more or less frequent and finally disappeared. Now that we have covered a very, very brief history and information, let's go on to the timeline of the plague on the next slide. During the time period of 1347 to 48, the events that I will be covering are the Kaffa ships, the Sicily debt toll, France's condition, the anti-Semitism, and also Princess Joan. The start of the pandemic started with the Kaffa ships from Asia. The Black Death moved from China and Central Asia to Europe when an army led by Mongol ruler Jani Beg attacked the Genoese trading port of Kaffa in Crimea. As infected soldiers died from the disease, Jani Beg catapulted their plague-infested bodies into the town to affect his enemies. From Kaffa, the ships carried the epidemic westwards into the Mediterranean ports, quickly spreading the disease inland. The Sicily debt toll. Sicily and the Italian peninsula was the first area in Catholic Western Europe to be reached with the bubonic plague pandemic, also known as the Black Death, where it reached the region by an Italian ship from Crimea, which landed in Messina and Sicily in October 1347. This was the start of the plague in Europe, which soon spread and made most of the population die. France's condition during the pandemic was devastating. The plague killed about a third of its inhabitants. It is estimated that there were about 200,000 inhabitants at the time. At the end of the epidemics, between 15,000 and 18,000 Parisans had been killed. That is around 1/3 of the population, which kind of leads me to my next time period, when all of the anti-Semitism started. Anti-Semitism is the hate and discrimination towards Jewish people, and back then it was very large, but gained even more popularity due to the plague. People found a way to blame them for the plague and were stepped on. During the Black Death in France, where the Jewish population was small due to the fact that Louis X of France had banned them from France, the well poisoning rumors from France erupted into documenting persecutions and mass executions. Now let's go on to the next time period, 1350. Using the plague as a distraction for the British, Scotland attacked them and killed even more of their people. Norway became very overcome with the plague and was covered with cases. And the ships were traveling even more frequently, which spread the cases even more and more and spread it all over Europe. In the time period of 1353, the plague was almost over. The cases were fading one by one, but the after effects were disastrous. One half of Europe was gone, and 1,000 villages were gone too. And the economy was horrible because of the now missing jobs and people. There are even more peasants. But by 1400, the plague had finally vanished, all of it, and the state of Europe was okay again. This small hope caused the new era, the Renaissance, which many people and artists came together. Now let's go on to the documentation in the past on the next slide. The plague ceased when many people had finally learned not to travel and keep in touch with people, which made spreading less frequent. They quarantined, which wasn't very hard considering the now deserted towns and villages around them. And if you had the privilege to live in a very densely populated area, you would isolate more, which helped you become more healthy. Some effects that people had then were to deal with, which had no cure, was pain areas in the abdomen, muscles, coughing, which can be with blood, in the whole body, fevers, chills, fatigue, or malaise, diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, and also common was bleeding, delirium, headache, phlegm, shortness of breath, or swollen and tender lymph nodes. And finally, let's talk about the documentations. I have researched and found Samuel Pepys' diary, which recorded various incidents in the Black Plague era. It was, of course, in Latin, so I couldn't very well translate it, but in a subtitle, it said that it was all about the missing, about his personal life and the research surrounding the plague. And one more person was Peppo di Antonio di Lando degli Abruzzi. He had also another diary which recorded all of his dead family members and relatives and their last moments and conditions. Now, finally, to conclude, let's go on to the next slide where I will state some facts. About 50 to 60% of Europe died, which was approximately 25 million. But in Asia, it was about 3 times that, which meant 75 million people died. The Black Plague also may have rekindled the Great Plague of London in 1665. Victims died 12 hours after they were bitten, and the Black Death name came from the blood color that often infected your fingertips and legs. But also, a bonus fact is doctors from the Black Plague in 2021. These facts were very, very interesting, and I also went over them in my presentation, so I wanted to share another one, which was the plague doctors in 2021. Due to the recent coronavirus, people are taking extreme precautions to dress in the masks that plague doctors wore in the 1340s. It would be effective, but there is a warning coming with this. It started in Europe, but is slowly spreading to America, and there are people out there that are wearing these masks and dresses that want to lure you in. But the big problem is that they want to rape. If you see a person with this costume on, do not approach them or talk to them. Walk the other way and immediately call someone you trust. The after effects could be disastrous. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation, and I hope you learned something new about the Black Plague that terrorized the world.
Wow, thank you, Mahadi. I found it very interesting that Black Plague was this deadly, and just how inhumane the conditions were back then. Next, we have a Retrovirus by Chaitanya.
Hello, everybody. So, as I said earlier, I was going to talk about the retrovirus. Okay. So, let's start with the type. Well, like how the retrovirus spreads. The retrovirus is a type of virus that inserts a copy of its RNA into a host cell that it invades, thus changing the genome of the cell. Once inside the host's cytoplasm, the virus uses its own reverse transcriptase enzyme to produce DNA from its RNA genome. The reverse of the usual pattern, thus retro, aka backwards. Some examples of retroviruses are oncornavirus, lentivirus, spumavirus, and HIV, and also etc. Because there's a lot. Retroviruses are different from regular viruses because retroviruses contain only RNA, while viruses contain DNA and RNA. Retrovirus has no specific treatment for people. Has no specific treatment. That means like there's no vaccine or something. There's nothing. For people with healthy immune systems, retrovirus infection of the bowel is a self-limited illness and will only last a few days. And retrovirus is super hard to get rid of because it has no specific cure. So try to avoid it. And as you see here, It says deadly, dangerous, and damaging because it was. There's no specific cure. You can't cure it, and yeah.
Yeah, I found it interesting that the retrovirus did not have any DNA, which is surprising to me because I researched that I found DNA and RNA are usually found in a virus. And also, I didn't really expect a virus with such a fun name. I mean, retrovirus. Okay, tuberculosis by Arush.
Thank you, Vivon. So what is tuberculosis? So tuberculosis is a potentially serious infectious bacterial disease that mainly affects the lungs, but can spread to other parts of the body. So how tuberculosis first came into history was on March 24th, 1882, when Dr. Robert Koch announced the discovery of Mycobacterium tuberculosis, which is the bacteria that causes tuberculosis. During this time, tuberculosis killed one out of every 7 people living in the United States. This happened around the time of the California Gold Rush. So, his discovery was the most important step taken toward the control and elimination of this deadly disease. This disease is still going on now, but it's rare and it can be treated. Some symptoms include cough, but it's not your normal cough. It's really bad. You get like black stuff spitting out. And you also get weight loss, night sweats, and you get a fever. So is it curable? It is curable, but it's very hard to cure it because it needs a lot of medication, and it affects different areas of the body. It's not only in the lungs; it's like your eyes, everywhere. It's it's very rare though, because there's less than 200,000 cases in the U.S. every year. Next slide. So, like I said, there's less than 200,000 cases per year in the USA. Tuberculosis is fatal after about a month, and it's infectious. It means it can be transferred from one person to another person by breath, but it's very rare because the germs of tuberculosis die almost immediately when it's outside, I guess. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Arush. I found it pretty interesting that tuberculosis makes you cough black stuff. And it also is self-explanatory that it's tubes because it reaches into the respiratory system, but that totally changed my mind when you said that it affects different areas of the body. Next we have Wish doing SARS, yeah.
Hello, I'll be talking about SARS. The first thing I'll be talking about is how it was in the symptoms. Then I'll be talking about the impact and all the effects that it gives. And finally, I'll be talking about how it ended. So, the timeline of SARS is, first of all, SARS was found in China and Vietnam and Hong Kong in 2003 on March 12th. It's surprising how all the viruses come from Asia areas. And then CDC issues interim domestic guidelines for management of exposure to the SARS virus. And later, CDC publishes a sequence of the virus believed to be responsible for the global epidemic of SARS. And finally, CDC updated the SARS case definition, which reduced the number of cases in the US. So, can you go to the third slide? Next one. So, SARS, short for severe acute respiratory syndrome, was an early version of COVID known also as CoV-2. It was caused by an unknown COVID. It had approximately 30,000 nucleotides. And for the impact, there were 8,400 so cases. The symptoms of SARS are high fever with some diarrhea, aching, and low oxygen levels in the blood. And the disappearance of SARS, the SARS virus caused 774 deaths worldwide. The vaccine known as AG 7088, made by Pfizer, put a stop to the deadly virus SARS.
Are you done?
Yeah,
I think you have one more slide though.
I already did that. You just missed to do it.
Okay. Okay, welcome to the interaction and Q&A session. This is where we'll be answering some questions. You can post it in the Q&A section of the Zoom chat. Yeah, we're that's it. Let's begin. So a few questions that we have are: what would you do if you were to handle a community with a disease?
I guess I'll start with that. I mean, first, I think if there was a community with a disease, I'd find out what are its symptoms, because a lot of diseases that previously, if they had similar symptoms, it's probably easier to cure them.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Yeah, go on.
yeah, what I would do, I would maybe like take a look at the virus, like you said. I would take a look at the virus and like see what family it in, and then see if you can cure it with the vaccine.
Okay. Yeah. I would do pretty much the steps I mentioned in my slide. I would just find out more about the virus, then I would test on it, and then I would get it through the trials of vaccination. So yes, and a question that I actually got from this was that why get vaccines instead of treatment? Actually, treatment takes way longer to make than vaccines, so that's just why you can't get treatment before you get viruses. I mean vaccines. Okay. Question number 2: which one's the deadliest? Um. Okay.
I I think the Black Plague is probably the deadliest because you only had like 12 hours to live, and
True, but not for this time because Black Plague now is irrelevant. But I
yeah.
guess you could say, in relevance of time, Black
Yeah.
Plague was deadly for the people it was amongst. Yeah.
Yeah, I also agree with that.
Wish, were you about to say something?
No, I
Yeah,
was about to say.
Yeah, I heard you. Wish.
plague would also be one of the creepiest since like it's passed by rats and the doctors look like giant freaky birds.
True. Very true. Um.
I
Okay.
think I think over time influenza is the deadliest, but not like in that sort of manner. Like it will hospitalize a lot of people.
I agree. So do you think that it's likely that a bad disease will be used as a biological weapon?
Yeah, because I remember how Mahadi said that like what?
Yeah, they launched
Oh,
the
yeah,
bodies.
they launched the dead bodies of people who got the Black Plague to infect their enemies.
Yeah.
Very true.
So yeah, it's a weapon.
It could happen in this time too. There, like
Yeah.
I could have said that China actually was criticized of having labs who actually used COVID as a weapon, who accidentally manufactured COVID. I and that conspiracy was a shutdown due to the other forms and criticism and news reports and things like that.
Yeah, I also agree with that. COVID was used as a weapon. A lot of diseases could be used as a weapon, like Mahadi said. The Plague was used as a weapon. And COVID, apparently, it was made by China, and it was supposed to be like a super weapon, but it wasn't supposed to really harm anyone like that, and it wasn't supposed to be spreadable.
No, that
It,
that
mhm.
can.
No, it did not. That did not happen. It came from bats. Bats had it, and yeah, bats
Yeah,
had it, and then some guy ate bat soup, and then he got it, and he infected the rest of the world.
yeah. It was just a conspiracy that China made it as a weapon. Yeah, if anybody has any questions in the Q&A,
Someone
no?
has a question in the chat. One of
Okay,
the 10.
does okay, what about the current virus COVID-19? Didn't I already discuss that? What's your exact question, Parin? Parin, you can unmute, I think, right?
Attendees
Yeah,
can do.
yeah. No, everyone here is an attendee. So, well, I mean everyone in the Zoom meeting.
Okay, Parin, can you unmute?
Or can you at least like state what you mean by the current situation? Like, what about the current virus?
I'm pretty sure he
Because
means like how deadly is it?
Yeah.
oh, well, I mean it's pretty deadly because it's extremely infectious. Um, it does die at high temperature though, and
True.
it does have like a certain range,
I have
but
a,
it's still deadly.
I have a question. If you could, what virus would you like make a cure for?
Corona, because we have we have that whole situation right now.
Yeah, because if you cure corona in this times, it's not coming back for pretty long.
Yeah, but here's the thing: we already have a virus for that. Well, like it's just not so. It's not like 100%. It's sort of like
Actually, yeah, I think we should get like a cure for COVID because then it'll free up time to cure the other viruses. Because I think Ebola is still around. There's also influenza, tuberculosis. Those are around. We have time to deal with those. But COVID,
Retrovirus is also
yeah,
deadly. It's still around the world, and it kills a lot of people every week. Yeah.
yeah.
Plus,
So if we find a cure for COVID, then
I just couldn't find the death rate.
we would have the time to make other cures, right? I
what?
think. I
but
think.
also you
Technically, there is already a cure for COVID, but like a vaccine for COVID, but it's not the
Yeah.
most reliable
Yeah,
because it you still have a chance of getting COVID. It's just the chances are low.
chances are
Yeah.
low. Even if you do get it, it'll just go away like faster and less chances of you dying from it. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like immunization. Like you know how almost every 5 years you have to get like a tetanus
Yeah.
shot or something
It's
like that, or like
um
meningitis.
yeah, through my research I found out that the viruses are just 90% effective. There's also 80% effective viruses too.
and plus if you had a completely functional COVID vaccine, if there were any other coronaviruses, we could just use that and base it off.
True. True. Yeah.
um, I have a question. Is Pioneer having like problem with unmuting? Because if he or yeah, if they are like the host can like ask them to unmute.
Yes, Parin, if you do want to ask the question clearly, then you can unmute.
Because he just raised his hand and then he put it back, like lowered it again. So I'm not sure if he really has a question or not.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you for coming to the Let Us Talk It webinar. We'll be discussing the topic shortly. Srini uncle, could you?
Hello.
Yes.
Hey,
Yes.
yeah. Hey, wonderful job by all the youths.
You didn't end the live stream yet.
We didn't actually do a live stream apparently because you see it's not recording.
Okay, wonderful job. Yeah, if there are no more questions, we can conclude.
I have a question. Are we gonna pick like discuss if we're like